Hello Nordangia students and welcome to tutorial 2 of our programming using Visual Basic series. In this tutorial we're going to look at input and output. And we're going to look at exploring how input, processing and output works when programming a simple calculator. Input, processing, output is the key fundamentals of how computers work. So let's have a look using Visual Studio. So I'm going to open Visual Studio and we are going to create a new project. And make sure I've selected Visual Basic and then Windows Forms app and next. I will call this Simple Calculator. And make sure the location is saved within our documents and our Visual Basic folder. And we go next and then next and create. And Visual Studio will set up the environment for us to do some coding. And basically here we're going to be taking two values. We're going to be taking two numbers, and then we'll be doing a calculation, and then we'll be feeding back the result to the user. So I need to add some items on here. So I'm going to make this a bit smaller, and on the left on our toolbox, and if it's not there, just make sure you click on the toolbox and pin it. On the left, we're going to find the label icon. There's two things, there's label and there's text box. And a text box is where the user enters a value. A label is just a read-only item. So in this case, I'm going to put a label, and I'm going to add some writing here. So I'm going to put, so on the bottom right, go to text, and I will say, please enter the first number. And then press enter and it will appear like so. I then get a text box, which is what will be entered in. Drag it underneath, and we can make this bigger so it goes the same length as the other one. We'll get another label, drop that in just below, and we'll say in the text, please enter the second number. Press enter. We get another text box down here and make it bigger, same length. And let's just make sure our names are correct. So I'm going to select the first label, go to the very top where it says name. I'll put, this is a label, so it's going to be LBL. And I will say first, capital F there. Then I've got the text box. Text boxes are TXT. Always beginning because it's a text box. Then we have the second number, so I put LBL, second. And then we have our text box. I'll change this to TXT, second, enter. Next bit, I need another label, which will have our answer. And so again, our name will be LBL answer, and go to text. And we'll put sum of the number is, press enter so it appears. Like so, and I get a text box. Make this bigger. and we go down to the name, and we'll say txt, capital A, and then answer there. And I get a button, and I'm going to call this calculate. So just make this bigger, smaller down here so it fits. We'll call this button btn calculate. Go down to the text and I'll say calculate. And let's change the name of the form. So select the form and we'll change the name of the form. We'll call it calculator. And we'll say FRM calculator. There we are. At the same time, I will go to text and put calculator there, and it will appear at the top. So this is my design. I've already now got the design of what my form is going to look like. The next part, we need to add some coding in. So I'm going to click on everything will be linked to this button. It will then take whatever is contained within these two text boxes here, and then it will produce it'll do a calculation and it will display it in the sum text box. So I will double click on calculate and it'll take me to the coding. And this is where I now need to add some instructions to tell the button what to do with the different objects on my menu. So the first thing to do, and I'm going to add we've got our class here, which is for our form, and then within there we've got our sub program for our button, which is for click. You can see the name. Okay, if for example I clicked on a label, it would then add a section for in terms of the label. And if we add code into here and we want it to work for the button, then it won't work. We have to add it to the correct place. So we're going to, first of all, we're going to declare variables. And a variable is something that stores a value that can be retrieved later. And so it can be used for calculations, but it can be retrieved later. So we need to declare these variables. So I'm going to use what's called dim, which means declaring. And I'm going to create the first one, the name of it called first. And I want to say this variable first is an integer. And an integer is a whole number. I'll do the same again. I'm going to have declare the name variable second. Again, it will be an integer. Okay? So I've got two variables. These are what's going to store the values. At the moment, they're underlined in green. Why? Because they're not used at the moment. They'll work. This program will work, but it's not used. Okay? The next what we need to do is assign values to the variables. Okay? From our inputs. So basically, we need to say whatever we type in our text boxes, it will then assign it to our variables, because putting it in the text box doesn't mean it's going to store it as the variables. So I need to take first, which is the name of the variable, and we then say whatever is held in txt, and it actually opens up a choice of items. We have txt first, which is great, txt second and txt answer. So we want txt first dot text, because it's a text box. So it will take the contents of the text box txt first, and it will store that in the variable first. We'll do the same with second, and this time txt, and we then can choose second dot text, and so it will take the contents of whatever is in txt second, and it will store it as the variable second. And then finally, I want to output the result, and we want to output the result to our answer. So we need to say txt answer dot text, like so. And basically we want to say this text box that we have, okay, will display the outcome of the two variables. So first add second, like so. So what we're doing here, we're declaring two variables, first and second. We're declaring them as whole numbers, which is known as integers. We're then assigning the values to the variables from our inputs. So we're saying first equals, which means storing whatever is written in that txt first.text. It has to be a number, otherwise there will be an error. And it'll be the same with second. It will store the contents of whatever is held in txt second. And then we'll output the result, which will be then output to txt answer.text, which is the text box called txt answer. And it will then display the result of the variables, the contents of the variables first and second added together. So when I press simple calculator, it does a bit of running. It says an error, so I'll press no there. It says it cannot access this form one, so I need to double click. And just like before, it's telling me there's an error on line 34, which is this form is a different name. So I need to go back. What's the form called? It's called form calculator. So I need to change it. So let's just copy that, go back, and I will paste it. And so actually, when I paste it, the error has disappeared. I can then go back to my form and then run it and play. Let's see if this works. And it appears on the screen, which is great. It works. So I could put some numbers, so 45, let's say 23. Click on calculate, which is when this is what will then run the code. So click on calculate, and it will display the result in our answer text box. Thank you very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.